universe's intentions. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Jesus Christ emphasized repeatedly the spirit, not the letter, of the law. In chapter 5 of the Gospel of St. Matthew, he speaks of the sin of killing and of the legal punishment attendant on that sin, but says that more important than the act is the desire to kill or to do harm. He shows that the sin of harmful desire goes beyond merely wanting to kill. My message to you, he said, is this: whoever is angry with his brother without cause already stands condemned. Whoever contemptuously calls his brother a fool shall answer for it to the Supreme Council, and whoever calls his brother an outcast of God shall be in danger of hellfire. Brother here means any other human being. For all of us in the highest sense are brothers and sisters, children of our one Father, Mother, God. The true self of one is the self of all. To hurt another is, even if one doesn't realize it, to hurt oneself. Swami Kriyananda in The Path recalls an episode in which the Master Paramahansa Yogananda revealed his sense of identity even with the plants. One day, Kriyananda wrote, "We were moving a delicate but rather heavy tropical plant into position on the hillside. Our handling evidently was too rough, for Master cried out, 'Be careful, what are you doing? Can't you feel? It's alive.' To wish death to anyone, to wish even harm to any other creature, is to deny in oneself the reality of that divine life of which all of us are manifestations. It is, in short, to deny the eternal truth proclaimed by the Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter. The self is never born, nor does it perish. Once existing, it cannot ever cease to be. It is birthless, eternal, changeless, ever itself. It is not slain when the body is slain. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind."
Quando leggo questo passo di Gesù, e mi ricordo di averlo letto anche tante volte prima, quando ero più giovane, dove dice, per esempio, chi dice pazzo al fratello sarà sottoposto al fuoco della Genna, cioè il fuoco dell'inferno. Devo ammettere, quando ero piccolo, che queste parole non è che mi ispirassero tanto.
And then I thought, maybe a teacher in a school, in an elementary school, talks with these words to children. And then a children says, "You're crazy." And then the teacher says, "You will burn in hell." In reality, when we try to understand, and when with the spirit of a disciple, and we want to understand the words of Jesus, of course, they were spoken many years ago in a very particular society, but they have an eternal significance, universal significance. And because we are disciples of life, we want to understand. Jesus uses a particular language, and to understand what this language is, we must help ourselves. And Yogananda, in his comments on the Gospels, gives us a great help to all those who want to understand the true spirit of Jesus, of his presence, of his second coming, like he called us, in the heart, and then live in the presence. That is possible. It is possible when you read the comments of the Master and of Swami. Jesus, when he speaks about these things, he doesn't say these words. He says these words, and they are part of the Sermon on the Mountain. And this is not spoken in front of a huge crowd of men or political speech. Political speeches are often superficial, but what he says on the mountain is more like a satsang to his disciples, intimate disciples. And at the beginning of this sermon, of these words, in the Bible it says, he looks at the crowd of people and withdraws. He withdraws into the mountain, and there are his disciples, who are just a few. They follow him and listen to him, not only with the mind, but with the heart. So let us also try to be these disciples and be with Jesus in this special place. And let's try to be intimately united with his spirit, with his presence, with the meaning of his words. And so when someone would ask me, what is the essence of the teachings of Jesus? I would not cite this passage necessarily and say, whoever calls his brother an outcast of God shall be in danger of hellfire. This would be maybe not a very good representation of Jesus. I would try to find something more deeper, something to a teaching to which all other things are connected. So, for example, what else does Jesus say? He says, the kingdom of heaven is within you. So when he talks about getting angry, judging another person, calling another person stupid, or calling him ignorant, then he doesn't really say so much about what you do to the other person, but he talks about what happens within you when you enter in the state of consciousness. And so let's start about what happens within us when we are angry. I'm sure that to none of us this ever happened, but to me it happened more than once that I got angry. And Yogananda says something, and this is very connected to Jesus. Yogananda and Jesus, they are very direct, and they have a very great sense of humor. And Yogananda says, when you are angry, then it's like being in an oven, and the oven doesn't heat up immediately, it just heats up slowly, more and more and more. And this is how Yogananda describes what happens within us. And he says, you lose perspective when you get angry. You lose perspective of things, of reality, of a bigger reality than your own very subjective reality. So I remember years ago, I had my teacher of Greek and Latin in my school, and this teacher abused, in my opinion, his power. I asked him if I could go to a musical weekend with my violin and to be absent Saturday morning. We used to go to school Saturday mornings when this teacher had programmed something in school. So the teacher said no. So maybe this was wrong, but then I went to the school director. So the school director said, yes, you can go. So then the Greek and Latin teacher came to me and said, from now on, I will obstacle you. And I felt this in my very young sense of justice. I was very young, and I wanted, inside of me, I wanted to shout something, but I couldn't because I was too young. But this opportunity was presented to me later on when I finished school, and with a friend, I went to Rome because I wanted to learn Italian. And a group, this very teacher, came with a group of students on a school exchange. And we knew these students because we had been in school together, even though in different classes. So we would meet at night and we were having a party, and the teacher came too, and he looked at me with this very arrogant gaze and said, in that moment, he was not my teacher anymore, and I could express my anger. And in front of all his colleagues and students, I talked to him with a lot of anger. And so I would have probably burned, I will need to burn in hell for this. But later, I had to rethink this reaction. And this is the beauty of spiritual growth. We do something, but because we are dedicated to introspection, we also need to think about what we do to understand better if what we did was the right thing. And now, when I think about this man, I think he loved his students. He had a very noble spirit. His way of teaching, he taught with a lot of idealism. And even before he became a teacher, he was a monk for a small amount of time. So I had to adjust my remembering of this teacher and see him in a bigger picture where I could also embrace his greater reality. And when I reacted, I was only 19 years old. I would like to add that. So there's also another way to relate to anger and irritation, which is to think, what can you do with this energy? You can do something good for yourself with this energy of anger if you don't throw it out against other people. So I remember someone full of energy, and when she was maybe 50 years old, or his mother, and together with his father, they wanted to learn Italian. And I was already living in Italian, so they came to visit me. And she had mother tongue teacher in Amsterdam who told my mother once, you are too stupid to learn Italian. So this is maybe not a very good attitude for a teacher. How would some react if someone tells you, you are too stupid to learn something? My mother didn't say anything. She didn't react. And together with my father, they booked an intensive Italian course here in Livorno, and they learned Italian quite well for a beginner, especially beginning in its 50s. Another example, maybe more clearly spiritual, it has to do with the chant that the song that the choir just sang. I live without fear. It's a beautiful melody. What does this song say? And how was it created? Swamiji must have felt himself criticized for a long time. There was a man at another village who for many years never really integrated himself into the community. He didn't want to contribute to the community fees. He had just his own things and his own agenda, let's say. At a certain point, Swamiji asked him, or you contribute with your energy to the community, or you leave. Many years had passed, and this man was very critical towards Swami. And so he goes to Swami and gets really angry and elencates all the errors of Swami and all the faults that he made. And Swami listened to this man. And while he listens, at a certain point, this beautiful melody of the song comes up within him. And when the man leaves the room and he was freed from the presence of this man, he sits down and writes down this song that we just listened to. And this is a little bit like the affirmation we just did with Shivani. If you remain in the deeps of the ocean of your own self, even if you're criticized, these people can't touch you. Of course, this is a gradual process. Maybe a little bit you are touched, but you don't lose connection with your inner deep soul. And if you are united with this deep presence within you, even if you are attacked, you might take a piece and pen and write down a beautiful song. So what happens if you call another person a stupid or an outcast of God? Except from this being quite dangerous, because you can make big mistakes of judgment. When I was little, I practiced judo for many years, and at a certain point, our school went on a competition against another judo school. And so we all sat down, one next to the other, and our adversaries were sitting on the other side, and I looked at them with a very fiercey gaze. And then I looked at them and I thought, oh, I'll just knock this one out in 1 second when I looked at my adversary. And instead, after 2 seconds, I was on the floor when I had my combat. And the others were judging me, and they said, it looked like you fell down just by yourself. You didn't defend our school. You didn't fight right. So it's very dangerous to judge another person on a practical side, but also on a spiritual. For many years, especially since I live here at Anandasisi, but even before, I have always been connected with Ananda. I always wanted to serve this work. And when I started to understand better the teachings, somehow when I reacted, I received a message how to understand them better on a higher level. On maybe I could understand something on an intellectual level, but not truly. And these corrections that came to me as an intuition, they often had to do with the reality of others that I did not see well. So I had to combine my intellect to my intuition. And then I thought there's only one really intelligent person in this world, and that's God. So I have to stop feeling myself very intelligent, but listen to God's intelligence. Because if I do that, if I can go beyond my ego and try to listen to His intelligence through others or within myself, it doesn't matter how His intelligence comes to me, then I feel free. Then I feel I'm living in my greater reality. The last thing that Jesus says, and this is a little tradition, but he says, when you call your brother crazy, and in another translation it says ignorant, a sinner, this is also very important, not to think that we are further on the spiritual path than another person. Even people who, in your opinion, are not on a spiritual path, they could still be further on a spiritual path than yourself. The other day I had a beautiful conversation with a school friend with whom I always remained in contact, and he had an operation on his hip, and so we talked together. I called him to see how he was doing, and at a certain point he said something that touched my heart so deeply. We were talking about the conflict in Ukraine and Russia, and he says, but all these young people, they are not Ukrainians or Russians or Polish anymore. They are so connected with their cell phones because they want to be connected. They want to be connected in love. And this really touched me a lot. And I felt inspired by someone who apparently is not on a spiritual path. But it was so clear that inside of him he is on some path because he was able to inspire someone else. In Mount Washington there was a monk, James Collar, and Yogananda said he had the karma of the chaos, and around him there were always problems and chaos, and people were quite tired of him. Apart from the master, who didn't think he was tiring, he thought that this monk had great devotion, and this was said by another direct disciple. And once the master was in 29 Palms, which was a property that he had bought outside of Los Angeles to be able to work on his scriptures. And no one should know where this property was. And James Collier was not one of these people. He should not know where the master was to write, especially according to the other monks. So one day, 3 monks who were with master in 29 Palms, they hear doot, 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 and they look outside, and James Collier gets out of the car, and he says to the other monks, tell the master that I'm here. And the monks say, how do you know that the master's here? And he says, I don't know. Devotion. He was so devoted to master, he just knew where the master was. He never lost him. He was with him in his heart always. And Yogananda said, about him, he will find God. I don't know how, but he will find God. And he saw him walking on the beach and he saw a light around him. And he said, Divine Mother told me that he will find God in this lifetime. So these three phrases of Jesus, if you bring them back to the one phrase, the kingdom of heaven is within you, then they become alive. They become something so beautiful and inspiring to not only not kill someone else, which is quite natural, but hopefully, but also to look into your heart, to do introspection, to see what happens within you if you have certain types of thoughts and emotions. And also when you sit down to meditate and maybe thoughts come up of anger or negative thoughts, whatever, then embrace them, be happy, because if you would not have sat down to meditate, maybe you would not know that you have these thoughts inside. So meditation is always important to become more aware of what is within us going on, and then you just offer them up to the point between the eyebrows. And the beauty of this work that we do within ourselves is that we start to experiment our life and ourselves being ever more calm and friendly and loving and compassionate. And I would like to end repeating the prayer that we repeated in the beginning. And I ask that you close your eyes and pray together. Teach me to subdue discord by calm waves of my own harmony. Teach me to conquer insincerity may overcome any habit of idle criticism of others by turning censor against myself instead. And teach me finally to give the nectar opiate of thy peace to all tormented minds, that they may find rest in thee. Om Shanti.